divide into three parts: paraxial, intermediate, and the lateral plate mesoderm. Now, due to the embryonic folding, this intermediate mesoderm is shifted anteriorly or shifted ventrally, and this will come. Okay, you can see over here also. This is shifted anteriorly and they lie on either side of the dorsal mesentery as a longitudinal elevation of the mesoderm. This both is known as the urogenital ridge, which is further divided into two: one, nephrogenic ridge or nephrogenic cord, which we have already learned about this, the nephrogenic cord, and next one is known as the gonadal ridge. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to focus in the gonadal ridge. Now, this is the gonadal ridge, which is mainly present on a medial side of the nephrogenic cord, and this is going to develop into the genital system. Our male reproductive system over boys again. Now, today we are going to learn about the female reproductive system. Now, before that, you should have some idea about the indifferentiated stage of sexual development. Or indifferentiated gonad. क्यों indifferentiated gonad? What do you mean by indifferentiated gonad? Male reproductive system तो भइसक्यो होइन? Can anyone answer me this question? Indifferentiated gonad. अनि कति हप्तासम्म सेम हुन्छ त? 7 week. Okay, so until the 7th week, the both male and female gonad, they resemble similarly. You cannot differentiate whether it's the male gonad or the female one. That is known as the indifferentiated gonad. So after 7th week onwards, that is mainly going to develop into the testis or the ovary. Now, what is the main factor which is going to play a very important role in the differentiation of the testis and ovary? What is the main factor? Initially, we have SYY. That means we have the Y chromosome. Initially, the sex of the chromosome is determined genetically at the time of the fertilization by which type of the sperm has fertilized the secondary oocyte. If that sperm is carrying the Y chromosome, then that will be a male. If that is carrying the X chromosome, then that will be the female. Now, in a Y chromosome, we have the specific gene that is known as the sex determining region on a Y chromosome. That is the gene which is mainly going to produce the testis determining factor. Now, this testis determining factor is going to differentiate whether the indifferentiated gonad is going to be a testis or the ovary. So that is the most important thing. Now, it's the same one. Now, see over here. Now, there is the presence of the there is the presence of the Y chromosome over here. Now, we have the indifferentiated gonad until 7th week. Now, after the 7th week, presence of the Y chromosome will produce the testis determining factor, and this will produce the this will differentiate the indifferentiated gonad to develop into the testis. Now, this Y chromosome will produce some factor due to which the medullary cord will develop, cortical cord will degenerate, and tunica alvicina will be the thick one. Now, this is going to differentiate into the testis. Now, what will happen if there is no any presence of Y chromosome? Now, over here, we do not have a Y chromosome. In the absence of Y chromosome, the indifferentiated gonad is going to differentiate into the ovary. Now, how? The medullary cord is degenerated. Now, compare this two. Over here, the medullary cord will develop. Over here, the medullary cord will degenerate. The cortical cord will develop, and there will be no tunica alvicina. Now, I'm going to describe in detail this part later on in the next slide. So, is it clear this one? You बुझ्यो अब? Yes, ma'am. Now, so initially we have the gonadal ridge. Now, how the gonadal ridge is formed, and what is the from where the gonadal ridge is developed, or what is the main source of the gonadal ridge? Is the paraxial mesoderm, intermediate mesoderm, or the lateral plate mesoderm? QO. Intermediate mesoderm. So during the 5th week, the testis and ovary that appear, or that is the gonad, the initial indifferentiated gonad is appear as a pair of the longitudinal elevation that is present on the medial side of the nephros or nephrogenic cord, middle side. So this is known as the gonadal ridge. Now in this diagram also you can see the gonadal ridge. This one, can you see the red color one? The blue color one is known as the mesonephric cord and the mesonephric ridge, and this one the nephrogenic cord or the nephrogenic ridge, and this one is known as the gonadal ridge. Now this one's the now this one is the gonadal ridge. Now just see, this is the gonadal ridge. This is the cross section of the gonadal ridge. Now we have got the epithelium of the genital ridge. Can you see the epithelium of the genital ridge or the gonadal ridge? This is the same one, eh? The epithelium of the genital ridge, what is happening over here? The epithelium of the genital ridge will get proliferate and this will penetrate the underlying mesoderm. Can you see the penetration of those epithelium of the genital ridge into the mesoderm? You can see over here the penetration. Now this will form the irregular, all those irregular cord are known as a sex cord or also known as the gonadal cord. You stop a sex cord or the gonadal cord. Now until 7th week, the initial gonad is known as indifferentiated gonad because you cannot differentiate whether it's the male one or the female one. So this is known as the indifferentiated gonad. You some yaad kar rahe, so that is the indifferentiated gonad. Now if the embryo is having the XX chromosome, say if the embryo is having the XX chromosome, then the cortex, this outer part, the cortex is going to differentiate into the ovary and the medulla will get regress out. But if the embryo is containing the XY chromosome, then the cortical cord is going to regress and the medullary cord will develop into the testis. Now this is the same one. Just see, ovary ma cortical cord develop, medullary cord degenerate. In testis or in the, if it is having the Y chromosome, then medullary cord will develop and the cortical cord will degenerate. This one is the same one, which is going to happen in the indifferentiated gonad after 7th week. Now, during the 6th week, or now we have learned about how the testis and the ovary has been developed. Now, inside the testis and the ovary, there are the germ cells which are present. So, how those sperm are formed, how those ova are formed, initially, also those germ cells. Now, during the sixth week, the pyramidal germ cell, you can see the pyramidal germ cell, which is present in the wall of the yolk sac. They will get migrate. Can you see the migration of the pyramidal germ cell through the dorsal mesentery, and they will finally enter into the gonadal ridge. Same thing. अघि अघि मैले जुन एक्सप्लेन गरेँ that I was talking about the genital ridge or the gonadal ridge. So this one is the ridge. अब यसमा त pyramidal germ cells आउनु पर्यो नि हैन. So this one is the pyramidal germ cells which will migrate from the dorsal mesentery and finally reach the genital ridge, and there they are going to differentiate into the sperm or the ovary depending upon the condition or depending upon whether the Y chromosome is present or not. So that is the main one. No. So this is the main slide from where today's class will start. Eh? So whatever I have told you previously, that is a kind of background for you. Now ovary, how the ovary is developed. So the ovary is mainly developed from the gonadal ridge. Now over here, I've already talked about this one. So this one is the genital. This one. This one is the epithelium of the genital ridge. The epithelium of the genital ridge will get proliferate. म स्टार्टिङबाट अलिकति इन्ट्रोडक्सन सहित भनिदिन्छु है ओभरमा. Epithelium of the genital ridge will get proliferate. They will penetrate into the underlying mesoderm. Over they will form the irregular sex cord. That is the indifferentiated gonad. Now, how the ovary is going to develop? After the 7th week, those indifferentiated gonadमा के हुन्छ, the cortical cord, the cortical cord will get that cortical or the sex cord will get dissociated with each other and they form the irregular cell cluster and further develop into the primary oocyte and sabai. All those oocyte will be formed. Now this one is the ovary. Now what about the medullary cord? The medullary cord is going to degenerate. Now this is how the ovary is going to form. I'll repeat once again. In the indifferentiated gonad, we have the irregular sex cord. Now those irregular sex cord in the cortical part will get dissociated with each other and form the irregular cell cluster. Cell cluster. Now whereas in the medulla, in the medullary cord is going to degenerate. Now this one over here, the surface epithelium will continue to proliferate and they give rise to the second generation of the cord that is known as the cortical cord. So continuous proliferation on the surface epithelium butter, and they will get breakdown into the numerous cell cluster. This is the same one which is surrounded by the one or more primitive germ cells. Now over here, can you see the germ cells? Your primary oocyte like your germ cells. Now these germ cells, this is the pyramidal germ cell which has been migrated from the wall of the yolk sac and they finally reach the genital ridge, and over there they will get differentiate into the oocyte. Now next one is, now our primary oocyte oripary, can you see the other cells which is present around the primary oocyte? Those cells, how those cells are formed? Those cells are formed by the proliferation of the surface epithelium. Oh, now those cells which are formed by the proliferation of the surface epithelium is going to form the follicular cells. So this is all about the ovary. Now, do you have any confusion or want to ask any question regarding the ovary? Okay, so भन्नुपर्ने कि फेरि भनिदिनु यो ovary? Indifferentiate gonad त बुझ्यो नि है? बुझ्यो indifferentiate gonad? बुझ्यो. Okay, now I'll start from before that, indifferentiate gonad पछि. Now those indifferentiate gonad, so suppose this one is the indifferentiate gonad. Now we have the irregular cell cluster. Oh, irregular sex cord are there, or we have the um, so we have the irregular sex cord are there. You take you. So this is the indifferentiate gonad. Now what is happening over there? You can see the cortical cord. You can see the medullary also over here. Now just focus if this is going to develop into the ovary, now then the cortical cord. Now this cortical cord or the cord which is present in the cortex of the indifferentiate gonad is going to dissociate from each other and they will form the irregular cell cluster. But the irregular sex cord which is present in the medulla of the indifferentiate gonad is going to disappear. This is one day. This is going to disappear. Now this is how the ovary is going to form. Now can you see the middle line? Black dot देखेछ? Oh, this one is the primary oocyte. Now from where the primary oocyte is formed? The primary oocyte is formed from the pyramidal germ cell. Now when you recall the previous slide or previous part, then pyramidal germ cells has been migrated from the wall of the yolk sac through the dorsal mesentery and finally reach the ovarian ridge or the gonadal ridge. Now over there, they will get differentiated into the oogonia, oogonia पछि primary oocyte. You know that one, primary oocyte, then secondary oocyte, and finally into the ova. So this is how the primary oocyte or finally the ova is going to develop. Now next one is, now can you see the primary oocyte has been surrounded by the other cells? Your cells can't either. So this is the same cell which has been developed from the proliferation of the surface epithelium. Now, these cells, which has been developed from the proliferation of the surface epithelium, is going to develop the follicular cells. So the follicular cells, the follicular cells is developed from the proliferation of the surface epithelium of genital ridge. अब बुझ्यो? Is it clear? Hello? Okay. Now, in the case of the testisमा के हुन्छ? Testisको केसमा if if the sperm is carrying the Y chromosome, then what will happen over there? If this is the indifferentiate gonad, then the cortical cord will disappear. The medullary cord will develop into the testis. So this is only the difference between the ovary and the testis, which you have to remember. बुझ्यो अब यो? Now this is the same thing. This is the division for you. Now see over here. This is the indifferentiate gonad till the 6th week. Now after the 6th week, what is happening? The cortical cord is going to develop. The medullary cord is designated. Now in the case of the testis, the cortical cord will disappear. You can see the cortical cord will disappear and the medullary cord will develop into the testis. Now next one is the descent of the ovary. तपाईँले पढिसक्नुभयो होला the descent of the testis है. So the descent of the testis and the descent of the ovary. Now just imagine, or you just recall the development of the male reproductive system. The testis is present in the scrotum. Now initially, but the genital ridge, which is the genital ridge is present in the posterior abdominal wall on the either side of the dorsally and the medial side of the mesonephric cord है. Mesonephric ridge or the nephrogenic cord को medial side मा gonadal ridge थियो भन्छ, that is present somewhere in the posterior abdominal wall over there initially. Now if the ovary and the testis is going to develop in a posterior abdominal wall initially, then that has to dip down because the exact location of the ovary is the true pelvis, pelvic wall mounts, and it is present in the lateral wall of the pelvic. And next one is the testis. The testis has to be reached in the scrotum. That means there should be a descent of both the gonad. Either the ovary or the testis has to descend down. So the most important thing, most important factor for the descent of the ovary or the descent of the testis is the gubernaculum. And you have to know what do you mean by the gubernaculum. I'll show you over here. Now just see. Can you see this is the ovary? Oh, this is the ovary. Now can you see the fibrous band? This is the fibrous band which is attached to the lower pole of the ovary, and this gubernaculum is attached in a lower part to the labium majora or the genital swelling. Labium majora or initially the genital swelling. So over here, this is the proximal and the distal attachment. Now, in the case of the female, this also has the gubernaculum also has the middle attachment. That means the gubernaculum will attach to the lower pole of the ovary. Then in a midline, this will attach to the lateral angle of the uterus. Now from here, this will finally attach to the genital swelling or the labium majora. So this is the attachment. Is it clear this one? You बुझ्यो अब gubernaculum? gubernaculum को attachment बुझ्यो?
बुझ्यो मैम.
Okay. This one is the diagram. This one is the normal position of the ovary. You can see this is the ovary is present in the lateral pelvic wall over here. Can you see? Now you have to trace this one. This is the proximal and this one is the distal. Now upper part of the gubernaculum is going to form the ovarian ligament. Can you see the ovarian ligament? Now this is attached to the lateral angle of the uterus. Now can you see this is the anterior one? Can you see another ligament which is coming in front? This will pass through the inguinal canal and finally attach to the labium majora. Now what is that ligament? Round ligament of the uterus. So this is going to form the round ligament of uterus. Now the cranial part of the gubernaculum will form the ligament, and the distal or the caudal part of the gubernaculum will form the okay. Can you see? Can you see? This is the gubernaculum. Okay. Will form the ovarian ligament, and this will form the round ligament of uterus, which is also the content of the inguinal canal, and finally attached to the genital swelling. त्यही भएर ovary तल नआएको हो कि. That's why the descent of the ovary is not more in comparison to the testis. The testis will come down into the scrotum, into the lateral angle of the uterus. That's why the ovary, which is present initially, which is present in the posterior abdominal wall, will descend down into the true pelvis, not more than this one. This is the reason for that. But when you compare this gubernaculum in the case of the male, gubernaculum in the case of the male will attach to the lower pole of the testis and to the genital swelling. It does not have any middle attachment. That means when there is a shortening of the gubernaculum, this will pull the testis down into the scrotum, and the remaining part of the gubernaculum will form the scrotal ligament. Is it clear this one? Now, next one is the development of the genital duct. We have already learned about how the ovary has been developed. Now, how fallopian tube, uterus, vagina, all those things will develop. They will all develop from the genital duct. Now, when you recall the development of the male reproductive system, there also you have come across the two different duct. One is known as the mesonephric duct. Next one is known as the paramesonephric duct. In this diagram also you can see this one is the mesonephric duct. This is the mesonephric duct, which is most important duct which should develop into the most part of the male reproductive system, genital duct of the male reproductive. Now next one is this is present lateral on a longitudinal invagination of the epithelium lateral to the mesonephric duct. This will form the paramesonephric duct, and this paramesonephric duct is going to form the genital duct of the female reproductive system. And this paramesonephric duct is also known as the Olfin duct. Mesonephric duct is the Olfin duct. Is it Thasai? So in this diagram also you can see this one is known as the mesonephric duct, and this one is known as the paramesonephric duct, which is blue in color. Now, now the mesonephric duct is giving rise to the genital duct of the male reproductive system. But the mesonephric duct in the case of the female will regress out due to the absence of the testosterone, and the remaining part of the mesonephric duct will remain as the efferent, paraefferent, and Gardner cyst. Okay? So this is the most important MCQ, or the most important SCQ for you. The remaining of the mesonephric duct in female. This you have to remember. Now the efferent is present in the mesovarium. Paraffin is present in close to the uterus, and next one is the Gardner cyst. This is present between the layer of the broad ligament along the lateral wall of the uterus and the vagina. So these are the remaining of the mesonephric duct, which will get disappear due to the absence of the testosterone in the female. Now, the remaining is the paramesonephric duct. Now, the paramesonephric duct will persist in the case of female because there is the absence of Mullerian inhibiting substance. But when you compare this one with the male reproductive system, in the male reproductive system, there will be a Mullerian inhibitory substance which will inhibit the Mullerian duct or the paramesonephric duct. But in the case of the female, due to the absence of the Mullerian inhibiting substance, the paramesonephric duct will persist. Now, this paramesonephric duct, this whole one, is going to form the genital duct of female reproductive system. Uterine tube, uterus, and upper part of the vagina will be formed by paramesonephric duct. See, this one is the paramesonephric duct, which has got mainly the three different part. The upper, you can see the cranial one. This is the vertical part. The crossing one, this is the horizontal part, which will force run lateral to the mesonephric duct and cross ventromedially the mesonephric duct. This is the horizontal part, and again you have the caudal vertical part, which will get fused with the other mesonephric duct from another side. So the paramesonephric duct. So the two paramesonephric duct in a lower part they will get fused with each other and form the caudal vertical part. So this is the cranial one, this one is the horizontal part, and this one is the caudal vertical part, the fused one. Now the cranial vertical one and the horizontal one, this is going to form the fallopian tube. Can I see the fallopian tube? Okay. Now from where the uterus will form, the uterus will form from the uterus and the upper part of the vagina. One third of the vagina will be formed from the caudal vertical part, the fused one. So this is going to give rise to the uterus and the upper part of the vagina. So this is the same one. The first part and the second part, that means the upper horizontal and the middle vertical one, will form the uterine tube. Now next one is the fused part. The fused part, the two paramesonephric duct from either side will get fused. That will form the caudal vertical part. This will form the epithelial lining of the uterus and upper one third of the vagina. Now the uterus has the different layers: endometrium, myometrium, and the periometrium. So the myometrium and the periometrium and the endometrial stroma, they are formed from the splachnopleuric mesoderm. So this is the overall development of the uterus. So I'll explain once again. The epithelial lining of the uterus and the upper one third of the vagina, the epithelial lining of the upper one third of the vagina also will get developed from the fused part of the paramesonephric duct. whereas myometrium and the perimetrium of the uterus, along with the endometrial stroma, will be developed from the splanchnic pleuric mesoderm. So over here also you can see the fused part over here. This will get disappear and they will form the uterine cavity. Uh, can you see the uterus and upper one third of the vagina? Is it clear this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Now next one is how the vagina is developed. This one is very important question for your exam. Okay. So the development rights out notes on the development of the vagina or mention the source of the vagina, development of the vagina. So how the vagina is developed? The vagina has the dual embryological source. The upper one third is developed from this one. The upper one third is developed from the fused paramesonephric duct, whereas the lower two third, this is the lower two third, the lower two third will be developed from the different way. Now, first you just see over here, can you see the fused part of the paramesonephric duct over here? Now, can you see the caudal tip of the paramesonephric duct? The tip of the fused paramesonephric duct will come in contact with the urogenital sinus. अब मैले urogenital sinus भनेको के हो त्यो त भन्नु पर्दैन होला कि भन्नुपर्छ जीआईटीमा पनि सेम थिङ. Okay. So initially we have the cloaca. The cloaca is will be divided by the urorectal septum into urogenital sinus and the primitive anorectal canal. Now this is the same urogenital sinus, or where in the posterior wall of the urogenital sinus, the tip of the fused paramesonephric duct will come in contact. And can I say this will project in the posterior wall of the urogenital sinus. Now can you see a small bulge? Can you already bulge देखिए यो? Or this is known as the sinus tubercle. That means the tip of the fused paramesonephric duct will come in contact with the posterior wall of urogenital sinus, and that will form the sinus tubercle. That will project into the posterior wall that as a tubercle. So you can see the sinus tubercle over here. Now this sinus tubercle, now compare the diagram B. This is the sinus tubercle. Now from the sinus tubercle, there will be the formation of the two solid endodermal outgrowth. Can you see? One and two. You can see the two solid endodermal outgrowth, which is moving above. Which is moving above. That is known as a sinovaginal bulb. This is known as a sinovaginal bulb. Now, what is happening over here in the sinovaginal bulb? Over here, you can see a canal. Over here, you can see. Now, this sinovaginal bulb, there will be the proliferation of the sinovaginal bulb, and that will form the vaginal plate. So, this is known as the vaginal plate. I'll repeat once again. The tip of the paramesonephric duct projecting on the posterior wall of the urginal sinus will form the sinus tubercle. This sinus tubercle will induce the formation of the two endodermal outgrowth. This two endodermal outgrowth will get this two endodermal outgrowth is known as a sinovaginal bulb. This will get proliferated and form the sinovaginal plate. Now you can see the vaginal plate. देखिए नहीं vaginal plate. This is the vaginal plate. Now this same vaginal plate is going to canalize. Can you see? Can you see the degeneration of the cells in between, or degeneration of the part in the middle, which will canalize this part, and this will form the lumen. So later, the vaginal plate will get canalized by the breakdown of the cell or by the apoptosis of the cell, and the lumen of the vagina will be formed. So this lumen of the vagina, and this one is the urogenital sinus. It will remain separated from the urogenital sinus by a thin plate or by a thin tissue plate. This is known as the hymen. Now this is how the vagina is formed. So vagina has the two different sources. One, upper one third is formed from the fused paramesonephric duct. Lower two third, lower part of the two third, this will be formed by the sinovaginal bulb, further forming into the sinovaginal plate, and the canalization will be there and form the finally the lumen of the vagina. Is it clear to you?
बुझ्यो मैम.
Okay. Now next one is the remnant of the paramesonephric duct. So the paramesonephric duct is the main duct forming the female genital duct. Also, this is the main one. But in some part, the paramesonephric duct may remain. Okay. So you can see the remnant of the paramesonephric duct over here. Can you see this one? This small part? This is known as the hydatid of Morgagni. So this hydatid of the Morgagni will be present in the cranial end of the will be formed from the cranial end of the paramesonephric duct, or you can say this one as a vesicular appendage. Now, next is the external genitalia. For the external genitalia, also you have to compare the development of the male reproductive system and the female. Now, this is the indifferentiate uh, external genital area. Now, initially, in both the male and in both the female, there is the presence in the third week. So this is the cloacal membrane. Cloacal membrane one is the thasne, na cloaca. The lower part of the cloaca will be closed by a thin membrane that is known as the cloacal membrane. Now, on a around the cloacal membrane, these are the mesodermal cells. The mesodermal cells around the cloacal membrane will get proliferated and form a pair of the elevated fold on either side of the cloacal membrane. This is known as the cloacal fold. Can you see? This is known as the cloacal fold. Now, when you trace the cloacal fold anteriorly, anterior to the cloacal membrane, the cloacal fold of both the sides will get fused and form the genital tubercle. This is a genital tubercle. Now, genital tubercle is there, cloacal fold is there, and cloacal membrane is there. Now, next one, during the seventh week, this is the cloacal membrane. Can you see the division of the cloacal membrane? Now, due to the urorectal septum, अघि जुन क्लोइकालाई क्लोइकालाई डिभाइड गर्छ नि urorectal septum, GIT को पार्ट रिकल गर है आइन घरमा. Now, this cloaca will be divided by the urorectal septum into the urogenital sinus and the primitive anorectal canal or anorectal canal. So this is the urorectal septum. When this urorectal septum will fuse in the cloacal membrane, oh, when this urorectal septum will fuse with the cloacal membrane, this will divide the whole the cloaca into the two part, urogenital sinus and posteriorly primitive anorectal canal. अब the division हुने बेलामा the cloacal membrane will also get divided into the two one, anal membrane, urethral membrane and the anal membrane. So this is the urethral membrane and this one is the anal membrane. Now the initial cloacal fold will also get divided into the urethral fold and the anal fold. Okay. Now next one, on a lateral to the urethral fold, there will be another pair of the elevation that is known as the genital fold. So this is the genital fold. Now what you have to remember both in male and the female is you have to remember about the uh, urethral you have to remember about the urethral membrane, anal membrane, urethral fold, anal fold, genital tubercle, and the genital soiling. Now, next is in the case of the female. In the case of the female, the genital tubercle will develop into the clitoris. Right? The urethral fold, will develop into the labium minora, whereas the genital soiling, this one, will form into the labium majora. But in the case of the male market, the genital tubercle will develop into the penis. And next one is this is the urethral fold. The urethral fold of the both the side will get fused in the case of male. And next one is the genital soiling will form the scrotum. त्यही भएर ग्युबर्नाकुलमको अट्याचमेन्ट थियो नि लोवर अट्याचमेन्ट के थियो ग्युबर्नाकुलम is going to attach to the genital swelling. So in the case of the male, the genital swelling will be scrotum, so it has the attachment with the scrotum. In the case of the female, genital swelling will develop into the labium majora, so it has the distal attachment with the labium majora. So this is all about the external genitalia. What's your view? Is it clear this one? Now next is the congenital anomalies. Now the defect in female genitalia. One is the uterine defect. There may be a presence of the double uterus. Our double uterus constituency, it may result from the failure of the fusion of the inferior part of the paramesonephric duct. Now the uterus will be mainly formed by the fused paramesonephric duct, but if the paramesonephric duct of the both the side will not get fused, then there will be a development of the two uterus with two vagina. This is known as the uterus by cornice. So over here, the uterus is present over there. The two uterus is present, but the vagina is the single one. That means upper part of the fused paramenophractic duct is not fused, or upper part of the third vertical paramenophractic duct is not fused. The lower part is fused. So over here, this is the uterus by cornice unicolus. So over here, there is not proper development of the one paramenophractic duct. So one paramenophractic duct will act as the rudimentary. Okay? So this one. So these are the considered anomalies of the uterus. Now this is all about the development of the female reproductive system. Okay. Please Swapnapurni, do you have any confusion about, or do you have any question regarding the development of the female reproductive system? Kisa Swapnapurni? Hello?
China, ma'am.
Okay. Now, what you have to remember, okay, I'm going to um, tell you some most important question of the female reproductive system. So, female reproductive system, the most important is the development of uterus, development of vagina. So, development of the vagina is very important for you. Okay. Next one is development of ovary. One. Next is the descent of ovary. You have to remember that one also. The next one is the remnant. के पनि छैन भने के सोध्नु पर्ने छ कसैले